네, 안녕하세요. 테크 전문 채널 토크아이티 전문군 시피드 고성입니다. 자, 오늘 10시 웨비나는요, 기업에서 데이터를 다루고 분석하는 분들이 갖고 있는 가장 큰 고민 중에 하나이죠. 어떻게 하면 애자일하게 비즈니스 파트와 협업을 하고 그들이 원하는 데이터를 제공할 것인지, 이런 것에 대해서 오늘 얘기를 나누고자 합니다. 특히 이제 파이썬 라이브러리 중에서 최근 6번째로 급성장하고 있는 데이터 분석과 시각화의 오픈소스인 스트림릿과 생성형AI, 그리고 그것들이 스노우플레이크의 플랫폼 위에서 어떻게 애자일한 데이터 기반의 비즈니스를 가속화할 수 있는지를 스트림릿의 공동 창업자이자 현재 스노우플레이크의 제품 경험 총괄인 아만다 켈리를 모시고 구체적인 대안과 방향성을 알아보겠습니다. 얼마 전에 아만다 켈리가 한국에 방문했는데, 그때 저희 토크아이티 스튜디오에 방문하셔가지고 사전에 아만다 켈리와 스노우플레이크의 이수연 테크 에반젤리스트와 영어 인터뷰를 했거든요. 그것들을 편집해서 한글 자막을 한 것을 오늘 여러분들께 공유 드릴 것이고요. 오늘 그 마지막 세션에서는 스트림릿의 활용 사례를 스노우플레이크의 유다니엘 수석 엔지니어가 이거는 한글로 여러분께 또 공유해 드릴 것입니다. 모두 50분이거든. 50분인데 여러분들 들으시면서 궁금한 거 있으면 그때그때 댓글로 써주시면 스노우플레이크 전문가들께서 1대1 답글로도 답변 주실 거니까 여러분들 편하게 들으시면서 질문하시면 좋을 것 같습니다. 그 다음에 웨비나가 마치고 온라인 설문도 있으니까 설문에도 적극 참여하시면 고맙겠습니다. 자, 그러면 아마다 켈리의 생생한 관점과 경험, 그 다음에 이분이 실제로 이런 데이터 분석하고 시각화하는 데 있어 비즈니스 데이터 협업을 하는데 어떤 고민을 했고 그것을 어떻게 해결했는지 그 생생한 목소리 한번 들어보겠습니다.
Hi, welcome everyone. My name is Sue Lee. I'm a tech evangelist at Snowflake, and today we're thrilled to have Amanda Kelly with us, the co-founder of Streamlit and director of product at Snowflake. Amanda's journey from co-founding Streamlit to leading product innovation at Snowflake is truly inspiring. We'll dive into her story, the evolution of Streamlit within Snowflake, and how both technologies are shaping the future of data and AI applications. So Amanda, could you say a quick hello to the audience?
Hello, it's so wonderful to be here. As Sue said, I'm Amanda Kelly. I'm one of the co-founders of Streamlit and now over here leading innovation over at Snowflake, and really excited to come talk to you about Streamlit and all the amazing things Snowflake is doing.
Great. So Amanda, let's start from the beginning. So you co-founded Streamlit, now an integral part of Snowflake. What inspired you to create Streamlit, and how did that vision evolve over time?
Yeah. My co-founder Adrian made to explain the Streamlit journey. So the real inspiration of Streamlit has always been, how can we make it faster for developers, for data scientists, for machine learning engineers to do the work that they need to do? And part of the problem for anybody working in advanced technology is often your work and your needs go ahead of the market, right? And where they are for the tools that you need to build. And so we first saw this when my co-founders, Tiago, Adrian, and I all met at Google X. So Google X was this source of inspiration and research and development in Silicon Valley. We met a bit over a decade ago. And that insight, right, again, was how can we make it easy, right? When you're coding, when you have an idea, you don't want anything between you and that. You don't want a tools team that you have to call to spin something up. You don't want to be a part of somebody's quarterly planning just to say, can I see this thing? Right. And so we said, what if we could make everything you need in Python, right? Data scientists, machine learning engineers, they love Python. They know how to do things in Python. What if we could make it so easy? All of this great stuff that we know. Tiago's a really great designer and front-end engineer. What if we did that, but it was all in Python? And so that was the idea for Streamlit. Could we make something where you could just write one line of code, right? I just need to see a bar graph, right? I just need to see an image, right? I just need to have a button here and have it all done in Python and work as a script, so it would work naturally, right, with the models that you were making and these other things, analysis that you were doing. And ultimately, again, what we're aiming for, we often say in Streamlit, if we have 3 values, it's fast, fast, and fast. We're always saying, can we take something that's 100 lines of code and make it 10 and then make it 1, right? So it just works out of the box, because usually what happens in a company is, you know, and you've worked as a data scientist, you know, someone like me might come to you and say, Sue, why did this thing go this way? Or what's going on with this? And your process might be, I got to get the data, I put it in a notebook, I'm trying to visualize it, I'm trying to figure it out. Maybe I'm making some slides. Right now I want to make it an interactive analysis. Now I've asked another team to maybe make an app for me. right? That whole process, they got to stand it up, they got to secure it. Like, I've seen these things take months, right? We constantly talk to companies who use Streamlit now, and they're like, it took us 6 months to make this thing. We recreated it in 6 hours. You know where the data is, but still, we use it for so few things because of that process. It's hard. It's hard for us to go and say, oh, I need to figure out where the data is, I need to put it in analysis, I need to put it in an app. And so we stop asking questions of the data. But if we can make it fast, if we can power our engineers, right, our data scientists just to have that idea and put it on paper, right, we think that's incredibly powerful. And that's still the thing that drives us at Streamlit. And that's what we did. That's what took off kind of in the community. I think Streamlit's now the 6th fastest growing Python library,
Right.
which is pretty impressive. And then a few years ago, the founders of Snowflake approached us and they said, we know how to do data pretty well, right? You guys know how to do this fast analysis. What if we brought these things together? And it took a little bit of convincing, but we decided it was better together. And that's why we ended up joining Snowflake. So that's the story in a nutshell.
That's so wonderful. When I first used Streamlit, it was truly a game changer for me. I still remember, oh, this is so fast. It actually unblocked my whole process of data science workframe. So I was very happy to be the first user. Okay, so moving on to the next question. So what was the moment when you realized that Streamlit was making a real impact in the open source community?
2 moments that I can really think of. Actually, can I do 3? There's 3 moments that I can think of. The first was when we launched it as an open source project, which was about a year after we started working on it. And at the time, we had no idea if it was going to take off. We'd actually spent a lot of time as founders saying, what do we tell the team if nobody starts to use this? How do we go maybe get a few big companies using it so we can raise some money? And so we were really unprepared for the moment we launched. It went viral. And all of a sudden, people were reading our Medium blog post, and they were tweeting about it, and VCs were calling us, and we were like, "Oh my goodness, we've hit a real resonant thing here," and that was so amazing. I remember we went away and we wrote basically the next 2 years of everything that we would have to build, right, in order to capture this. So that was really amazing. And one of the first things that we realized we would have to build was an easy way for people to share these apps. We'd made it very easy to build them locally, right? But the next thing you want to do is put it in the hands of someone else, right? And that's a completely different skill set. And so we said, well, to continue this growth, we have to give people a free, easy way to deploy these. So we built what's now our community cloud product. And that launched about 4 months before COVID hit, right? So it launched, it started growing, but then all of a sudden, COVID hits. And we start seeing all of these apps go viral, right? Overloading our services because everyone's at home, no one knows what's going on, right? The first apps are about what's going on in Italy, right? And then it's trying to grab data, everybody's sharing data out there, and we thought this is so powerful, right? So much of what's powerful in data is being able to share it with each others and have these open conversations. And there were so many universities and researchers at the time who used Streamlit actually as part of COVID to help. And then the last kind of other really big moment, right, it was after we came to Snowflake, but this is before anyone knows, right, that LLMs, right, are right around the corner. And then all of a sudden, right, that starts hitting the first models, get out there with ChatGPT. And again, we start seeing these apps go crazy, right, because again, it was the students, it was a lot of the researchers who figured out first some of the power of this. And because we've built Streamlit to work so easily with models and everything, some of the very first applications, right, that were coming out of LLMs were built in Streamlit apps, right? It's still a core part of OpenAI's stack, right, and so many others, because similar to that same value proposition back in the day, researchers are on the forefront. They need tools that just work in the languages, right, that they use, and that's why so much of LLM development and first applications actually is still built in Streamlit, and that's incredibly exciting.
So in 2022, as you mentioned, Streamlit joined Snowflake, and what motivated the team to make such a decision? It's a big decision for you, right? And what was the synergy of Streamlit and Snowflake?
We were building products as a startup, but what we really love doing is building Python APIs. And so when Snowflake came and they said, look, we know how to do this. We know how to secure the data, right? We know how to stand these things up, right, so that they can scale. So what we can offer together really is a one-click solution. And so together, right, Streamlit bringing the fast way, to bring the API, and then Snowflake bringing the secure, scalable one-click deployment means that we really are delivering on this promise of have an idea, ship it that afternoon. And when you have this together, it actually starts to change the way that teams work with data. Right, when we talked earlier, like there's so many ideas that I have and questions, but I often don't ask them because I don't want to bother the data science team. I know they're busy. But when you unlock the ability for people either to do it themselves or to make it so easy, right, for their data science team to do it, you start to see these loops, right, that come really, really quickly. We were talking earlier, and I had never really done enterprise at scale, right, before I joined Snowflake. And so it was really fascinating to watch this. Because the way that you develop and you think about what do I need to deliver for one person sitting in one room to spin something up is very different from what does an organization need to have the confidence to scale an application to 10,000 concurrent users, to say I'm going to give up some other product that I rely on that it will work, whatever language, right, have that high SLOs and that. And so what that means that we focused on is two things. One of which is how do we still tie ourselves to the forefront of what's going on in Python and machine learning and LLMs. And one of the great things about joining Snowflake is it allowed us to really have a team just focused on doing things in open source. And so that has a lot of what do we, how are we working with LLMs? How do we make that fast, right? Things like chat that we've added, but also a lot of things that we're seeing now that we get to sit with some of the biggest companies in the world, right? That are Snowflake's customers who say, I love this, but it needs to look like my brand, right? Or I need to have it laid out in a certain way. And so that's changed some of the things that we offer because again, we want it to not just be fast for one developer, we want it to be fast to adopt for 10,000 people. And if that means you need to use the colors of your company logo, right? We want to make that fast. We want to reduce that barrier. Then the second side is now we think about all these enterprise things. How do I make it work across so many clouds, right? How do I make it have replication and failover? How do we think about, role-based access control, but also user-based access sharing, right? How do we make sure that we have the monitoring and the SLOs, right, for those things to come up? So we think very deeply about that now, and the open source side works with our Streamlit and Snowflake team to make sure that we have a product that brings the best of open source, but also with the security, the scalability that you need as an enterprise to rely, on making that. And I think that's really, really exciting for both the developers and the companies of the world.
I cannot agree more. So I guess thank you so much for sharing your Streamlit journey. And now I believe you can share some real world use cases
Absolutely.
Where customers have successfully combined both Streamlit and Snowflake, right? So should we actually jump onto the demo?
Sure. So what you're going to see here is an example of actually building an app directly in Snowflake and using our Copilot. So you can use this with Python, and most LLMs out there write really, really good Streamlit code. Because it's an easy protocol, because there's so much training data, because it's open source, it makes it easy to do that. So what you're seeing here right now in the Copilot is we're just picking the data. You'll see there's an example app up right now, and you can see it's running one of the latest versions of Streamlit. And we're going to say, based on this data, can you just generate an app for me?
Yeah.
Right? And this is a pretty amazing thing because, even if you understand the code, getting to skip all of those steps, have something that you're working from is great. But imagine too, if you're not confident in Python, right? Being able to use LLMs to just say, hey, explore this data set for me. So you can see it's now changed, and it's suggested that the best thing that it can do, maybe for this data set, it's giving you some statistics, it's pulling it into a data frame, but it's also giving you, hey, maybe you might want to do these other things. It's giving you suggestions. It's a conversation that's going on, right, with the Copilot, where it's helping you evolve. And so what we're going to see by the end of this too is a pretty sophisticated app, right? You can see it writing all of that Streamlit code there.
Wow.
But you're never touching the code yourself. Right. One of the benefits, though, right, when you think about where LLMs are going, right, they can write so many languages. But the fact that Streamlit has such a clean protocol, the fact that it is so readable, I think really helps teams adopt it and trust it, right? Because you need to be able to trust that you can put that code into production. And, the LLM isn't always going to get it right, right? You want to be able to tweak it. It's often much easier just to go into the code, especially if you want to standardize things. But again, you can see the LLM by itself has it's done a nice layout. It's picked the drop downs, it made functional buttons. I think right now we're going to see it generate some visualizations too, which is actually a very powerful thing. We talk about it's sometimes very joyful, and my co-founder Tiago likes to say that Streamlit isn't no code, it's fun code. It's joyful to write the code. But I don't think it's very joyful to write charting code, right? As much as you love charting, just adjusting and getting that color correct. So I think that's an amazing thing of Streamlit. It integrates with so many different open source charting libraries, and having the LLMs just generate that chart for you. So here it's going to replace the code.
Wow,
And
as an
we'll see
ex-data
that.
scientist, this is amazing, mind-blowing,
Yeah.
because it can save like tens of thousands of
Yeah,
hours.
there we go.
And actually, I can focus on the
100%.
real impact business problems that
Yeah.
will move the needle, right?
Yeah, yeah. So it's helping you kind of, skip that step again. We're getting back to fast, right? You as a data scientist need to focus, did you get the right data? Are you analyzing it correctly, right? There are bad ways to present data, right? But this just is a really helpful coworker almost, right? That you can consult with, who can write the code. And again, because it's Streamlit, because it's easy, because it's an open source protocol, it means that, it works inside of Snowflake, but you can try almost any LLM out there and it will write great Streamlit code for you, which is why it's integrated into so many other tools as well.
Wow, Amanda, that was an amazing demo. We have some questions from the audience.
Okay.
We prepared 3. So this is the first one. So Streamlit has always been it has been about simplicity all the time, right? So now as part of Snowflake, it seamlessly integrates low code, as you said, no code to fun code application building with enterprise data management. So from your perspective, what makes Streamlit and Snowflake such a powerful combination, and why do you think this integration is so particularly valuable for developers and data teams?
Yeah, so we already talked about how Streamlit, just making it really easy, right, to write the code or even have the LLMs write it for you. But a lot of what we're looking at and my teams look at when we think about how do we build great experiences is just we watch users and we say we do it ourselves. We say what's the most frustrating step, and can we take something that's a pain point and make it more of a magic moment? And so much of what's really painful about developing is really just getting the data into a workable space, like having your environment set up. Every time I haven't coded for a while, I have to go back and I'm like, I'm on the wrong version of something, I gotta download it. I've been to so many hackathons where people said, man, the Streamlit part was so fun, but I only did it in like the last couple hours because I spent 90% of the time realizing that I had the wrong data set, right? That I had to clean it in a certain way, that I was running on the wrong version, right? All of this, again, gets in the way of, how can I just go from, I need to know this question our CEO asked us, right, to churning it out there. And so that's a lot of what we focus on the Snowflake side, right? Is not just the Streamlit pit, how can we make that great, but how do we make it so you can find that data easily, right? It's in there, you don't have to struggle with your environment. And that was the thing that we were most excited about, I think, when we joined Snowflake, is just by putting Streamlit directly on top of that. So as you kind of saw in the demo, we can just say from this data set, right, can you do it? It's already observing, right, all of the permissions, the controls, right? I don't have to worry about that. I don't have to pay any costs from taking the data out, right? We talk with a lot of advanced research companies who are like, the amount of time and money we just spend taking the data, moving it here to work with it locally, moving it back, right? These are, hours, when you add it all up, days, years wasted right across the team.
That's also resource and money.
Exactly, it is resources and money. And lack of joy. That's the thing that I really focus on. And so that to me is the magic that we've been working for, is not having to struggle with your environment, right? Not having to do any of that kind of data traffic intermanagement, knowing that it's secure and scalable, right? Just allows you to focus on that business problem, focus on that code. And I think when it's done well, it really is magical that you can just get that all done and shared, and you didn't have to think about any of the annoying bits.
All right, so we can talk about the second question. And in the previous session you delivered, you touched upon like several exciting areas for Streamlit's future, including like enhancing automation and self-service. So which direction do you see it as most critical for Streamlit's evolution and the roadmap? And also, is there any like new feature or capability that users can actually look forward to that's going to be released in very near future?
Yeah, so many. So we develop both on the open source side and on the Snowflake side. So there's some new stuff that's coming out later this year that we'll be announcing, at Summit, and after that, some of the things that I showed you with Copilot, which is in private preview now, which we're accelerating out, ways that we're connecting in and making it easier to connect to your data, to manage your files, to do things with Git, to manage all of these applications. We're about to release it also on Snowflake Container Services, which provides a lot more flexibility. So there's so much goodness that's coming there that's going to make it easier for developers and enterprises to scale. And then on the open source side, I actually can show you some of the stuff that we're working on right now.
Sure.
All right. So as we talked about, one of the great benefits of being part of Snowflake now is that we get to talk to developers at some of the biggest companies in the world, and we see what they're struggling with, and then we work to say, how can we make that easy? So one of the things a lot of companies have told us is, hey, I really want to transition away, right, from some more traditional BI tools. I want to be more app-centric, but I like certain layouts, right? I like maybe having a top navigation bar, right, or doing other things like that. So one of the things that we've been working out here, right, you kind of have your standard Streamlit on the other side, the new material icons and things, but we are going to be releasing top nav soon, right? So if that's a preferred layout that you have, again, we want it to just be one click. You could still have a sidebar content there if you want. You can pop your logo in there, right? This is the Streamlit logo because it was a Streamlit app, right? Or you could have, you know, it just there. So we want to make it really, really easy for you to recreate whatever is the standard of design, right? You know, for your company, just in that one line of code. You probably want it to look, you know, more like what your company looks like. So we just released some advanced theming, which is also becoming available inside of Snowflake, right? So this is what it would look like if you were Airbnb, right? Or if you were Apple, right, and using their theme, or Spotify, right, or Blackstone, right? So it's very, very easy to do this kind of configurability, you know, set all of these, you know, basically CSS level of things so that it looks just like what you want. And then you can imagine that, right, with the top nav, right, you're getting so much configurability. And again, it's same easy protocol. LLMs can help you write this, right? We're also adding so many other types of things that make it easier to do flexible layout, right? So horizontal container buttons, centered content, stretched elements, right? Distributed elements. Like, it's really starting to change, I think, you know, how people think about what Streamlit is for, right? It's not just very basic apps, but you can build these really complex, multiple pages, you know, full web apps, right? But you're still doing it so simply. It still has Python, it still has that simple protocol, right? It's still going to be able to build directly on your data, you know, even with LLMs. Some of the other things, we released this last year, but this is just, it's so fun. The way that we have the interactivity now, you know, in charts, right, that are giving you the event data, it allows you to make, you know, so much more interesting applications, right, where you can do these types of drill downs and you can really get to that understanding that your sales team needs to understand, you know, what's happening, you know, in this type. Or you can build, you know, chat apps, right? So this is showing like a popover here, right? Again, we've added all of these new things that just make it easier for you to build, right, what you want, right? We can set up a chat here. You know, I could have that, I can configure it with a popover, right, what I'm wanting to do. You can do these live things, right? And you can make these really powerful applications so you can talk to your data yourself, right? So there is both this side of how do we make it so that you can use LLMs, right, to make apps, right? You can do things with that. You can, you know, do research on your LLMs, but also how you can use them like chat and make it really easy to bring it into your applications yourself.
This is so exciting. Developers probably can't wait to see this. Unfortunately, we have the limited time, so we'll move on to the third last question. So with the rise of AI agents and vibe coding, productivity tools are increasingly focusing on AI-driven workflows. So how do you see Streamlit is evolving to support these trends? Like, are there any key considerations or challenges in bringing AI integrations and like capabilities more seamlessly into Snowflake or Streamlit?
Yeah, absolutely, and it's a key focus of what we're talking about. Obviously, I showed you some of Copilot, but also how we're evolving in the library to have chat, to do other things to make it easy.
Yeah.
Really, at the end of the day, I mean, I learn the most just watching our users, and we just say, what are you doing, what's interesting, and then how can we make that scalable, right, how we can bring it. That's how we first saw people hacking together, right, the chat bots, right, and wanting to put that in. A lot of what we've been talking about internally right now is how do we make sure that all the new generations of LLM tools will work seamlessly with Streamlit? How does that change our open source release process? How does it change, right, how we give examples and things like that, so that when you go to any tool in Snowflake or outside and you say, can you write this, it's going to write you perfect Streamlit code. Obviously, all of this new configurability that we're doing too, there are things that we're thinking about there. There's certain things that are better to do in more of a chat interface, but there's also so much more potential, right, for literally just drawing, right, something on the screen for you, for seeing that, for being able to point and click and say, I'd rather have dragged this over there. I'd rather this, you know, be blue, not red. And ultimately, at the end of the day, you know, even though Streamlit is a Python API, going back to that value proposition, we just want to make it fast, right, for you to get to that insight. And I think the key thing for a lot of AI and LLMs right now is just how do you get to that trusted insight? Right? How do you feel okay again about deploying this to that first person and then the 100th and then, you know, the 10,000th person to do that? And so making sure, right, that it works with LLMs, that we have all of the things, whether it's theming, right, or chat or whatever, and that those work, right, for LLMs to do that. But also that we maintain that clean readability, right, that it's easy to kind of talk to understand, right, what's happening in your app, right, to be able to look at that data. I think that's really, really important right now. You can say, no, don't send that chart to the CEO. That's not telling, right, the right story. We used the wrong data set. It's slicing the data in the right way. We need to go a couple layers deeper. Eventually, I think LLMs are going to be able to help us do that analysis as well. But we still really need people in the step to help translate, right? What are we doing? Is this the right thing? How do we make that call? And that's where apps can still be really, really powerful in understanding the data together. And so if we can make it faster with LLMs to do that, if we can make it so that you can use LLMs and agents in your apps, right? So you can do fancy things, and you saw some of that earlier when we were showing how we used agents, right, in an app to do these things, but you're making it easy for people to access it, right, with the right controls and security and everything, then that, at the end of the day, is a winning formula for really helping businesses accelerate.
Thank you so much for sharing your insight. And I guess we can also move on to the end-to-end live demo that you prepared.
Absolutely. So what I want to show is not just the Streamlit part, but how this is part of a broader ecosystem of how we make data science, data management work a lot easier inside of Snowflake. And so overall, what we're doing in Snowflake is saying, wherever your data is, whatever data type it is, right? Whatever format, unstructured, structured, whether it's an S3, whether you need to use Kafka, we can do all of these things, right? We can bring it into Snowflake, make it very easy for you to do the transformations, the pipelines, the management that you need, and then to use AI on top of that, right? To actually get to that business value. So I want to show a few demos of how all of this kind of comes together and how throughout this we use some consistent tools, notebooks with Streamlit involved, Streamlit apps to make this end-to-end process really seamless for you as a data user. So the first one I want to talk through is a product we have called Document AI. And so what Document AI is going to do is it's going to be able to take a lot of real-world documents you have. So much of the world is still run on paper, right? Whether it's a PDF document or something that you've scanned in, invoice forms, right? Things that people filled out, right? Surveys. And you need to bring this in, right? Because that's really useful information, often useful customer information, invoices, things like that. And you want to, use not only just the power of Snowflake, but pair that, right, with your other types of data to make something more powerful. And so we've built this tool to make it really easy to bring that in, then to use kind of fine-tune LLMs to make these actual pipelines, right? So these aren't just things that you do one after another, and then to actually, do SQL, things on top of that. So where that starts is in our Document AI portal. So what I've done here is that we have some inspection reports that we're going to look at. And so if I go into our inspection reports right now, what you're going to see is that I've already loaded in about 10 different ones, and we're going to use that to pre-train the model. So it doesn't think 10 is enough. It would like more for model accuracy, but we'll look at this because it actually has pretty good accuracy even with just these 10. So if I go in and I take a look at this, right, again, we've uploaded these documents, right, these are PDFs now, and you can see, right, this is the real document on the right side, right? But on top of it, what you saw was we're able to ask questions about this, right? And so this is what it's taking out, right? So here we said, what is the truck identifier number? It's able to correctly identify that, right? We're using this again to train the model, right? We can go through a few of these documents and you can see what it's extracting out, right, as the beta as well as the real data, and that so that when we bring in new documents, it's going to be able to understand and say, yes, right, did they do the right things to prevent, right, that contamination, right, or things like that. So this is a fairly simple one, right? All of these documents are pretty the same. So just 10 is actually going to get us a pretty good model already. So what I can do now, right, that I have these in, is I can actually go into a notebook. So I've already run this so that we don't have to watch me running all of the different cells. But what we can say is, okay, now that we've got those documents in there, now that we've got this model, right, that we've started to work with, how can I extract that data, right, put it into a pipeline, transform it, and be useful with it? So first thing I always do is I connect to my session here. And then I'm going to say, hey, I want you to go out, right? We have these reports on a stage, bring these all in. So you saw I did 10 earlier, but here's a bunch more, right, that we have. So here's about, 55 of them, right, that we want to say. And we say, let's set up a pipeline, right, to actually, do these transformations. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're just going to make sure that they each have a pre-signed URL, right? So that's going to help Document AI to cross-reference these, right, and make sure it's accurate. So you can see now we have all of these URLs. Now the next thing that we need to do, right, just common transformation, we need to take this semi-structured JSON, right, and then we're going to put it into a more tabularized format. So this is really, really easy to do in SQL, right? So we're able to just take that, right, and we can see here, right, it's starting to now put this into a format that's going to be more readable, right, for analysts to do something with that. Then the next thing we're going to do is say, let's start to generate some insights. So it would actually like me to do this in here. Let's see, ask the following question to Copilot. So we can go ahead and we can ask it this question, right? So again, Copilot can do things like Streamlit, which I already showed you, but we could also be doing things like helping it write, the SQL code. So 1 second, I'm going to select this because it'll give me better results if I do this. So we'll pick the analytics one. All right, so now I'm saying within that, can you help me answer this question, right? How do our trucks rank by overall inspection fail percentage? So now again, I got the data in, we've got it transformed. It's going to help write the SQL for me. So what I'll do when it finishes writing that is I will just add that. So we'll add this below here. And let's see how it does. Right? So now we've created a really interesting table. Right now, this starts to be something that you could look at. Right, you could take to your business leaders, and you could start to understand right how you can do with it. So what we saw kind of throughout that whole process, right, was we saw that it was really effortless, right, for us to bring these in to kind of pre-train that model, right, and then to go ahead and do that zero shot, right, to help us make this data not just something that sits right over in these PDFs, but it's actually in a tabular format that we can use it. And with that seamless automation, what was happening in the background, right, we applied that pipeline, right, it's applying those transformations so we can get, right, all of that data out. And then we were able to use things like Copilot, right, to actually say, hey, help me do something interesting with that data. So that's the first kind of part of it, right? So that's a new type of data set, right, that a lot of people don't have right now. But there's a lot of other things, right, that you want to do, right? You have, not just those PDFs, maybe you have call logs, right? You have a lot of unstructured data. This is the type of data that often your customer service agents, your marketing teams, your sales teams work with. And we want to make that, right, a lot more functional for you as well. So we put together a Streamlit app that kind of shows an example of how you might use these agents right on top of this data. So I've got a model selected here. And what we're going to do is we're just going to pretend, right, that I'm a customer call center agent. And I'm going to say that there's a call coming in. So the first thing it's going to do is it's going to use an ML classifier. And it's just going to say, okay, based on what we're seeing from this, we believe that the caller intent is that it's a recent enrollment event. And it's going to give me some sample questions, right, that I might, want to use and find things out based on that classification. So if I add that in here, so I'll just select one of those and it's going to ask that question, or I could write a question in here. So based on what it's seeing, right, about what this is coming in, how can the member find out more about the wellness programs? Well, it's doing on the background, right, it's picking the right agent. So it's saying for this is part of our knowledge store, right? So this is just a series of PDFs, right? This is a generally kind of available thing. Let's find the right PDF, right? And we'll help kind of extract and find the answer, right? So already, and many of you have seen this in other places too, but it makes it a lot easier to just find that information, especially when you're on a call with somebody, right? And you might need that. We also have the ability, the agent can say, what's the next best action, right? So it says, well, the next thing you should do is probably send them, right, something. And we could also use AI to create a draft of that email for us, right? And we can even hook it up. I didn't put in my email over there, but you could hook it up to actually send that email for you, right? Or there's a lot of apps that we see where people have them hooked up to Slack, right, or other things, right? All of this is configurable because it's just Python, right? So it's just, whatever your mind can dream, right, you can do it. Let's ask another question. Take this back. Let's say that they want to know the plan and coverage information of this member. So now we're talking about something that's very specific, right? This is probably data we don't want everyone to have access to. It's very specific to that customer. And so it's going to interpret this and say, okay, we need to find this user. That means it's going to be in our customer 360 data product, right? We actually need to go into the database. We need to find this information. So now it's suggesting that I refined it. What it's going to do, since we have to go into the database, it's going to use our contact center analyst, right, which is built on Cortex Analyst. So that's going to help us write the SQL code for it so that we can extract the right answer. So here it gave us the answer. So now that we know that James is part of the standard health plan, and you could see here what was the SQL that it used to write to do that, right? Again, this is part of help building trust, right? And also the result set, right, that it pulled that from. Let's look at one other. Because one of the other benefits, again, we have the multiple kind of agents in the background, right? It's helping figure out what's the right one, right? Ultimately, we're doing a lot of that hard work on the Cortex side, right? Either to find the right document, right, to do the analyst. But we also have this baked in, right, with a bunch of the permissions, right, that we have here. So now we've got a new member, Jessica Gill, and she has a grievance. She says, I have inadequate care. So we want to know what's that provider, right, that she's doing that. So again, it's going to classify this and it's going to say, okay, based on this, I need to go out to the user data as well. All right, we know it's the how group. So the next thing I might want to know is, well, how does the how group do in general? Is this kind of a one-off, or is this something that the how group is normally maybe not one of our best ones? So I might want to ask that. But what it's doing here is it said this is a security violation. Because what we've done is we've set up the application for one analyst to be able to ask specific questions to help them answer that, not to go into the database and ask any question, right, that they might want. Right? And that's a big thing about bringing AI and scaling it in our enterprises, right, is how do we make sure that that's happening in the right way. So I could show here, right, I had this turned on, maybe I'm in admin mode. If I turn that off and I re-ask this question, right, now it would let me answer something because I'm now allowed, right, of a higher level of access. And now it's going to be able to do that, and it's going to be able to write that SQL query again for me, go across a broader range of data, and actually give me an answer, right, that this is the total number of things that we're seeing, right? So behind the scenes, right, a lot of you know, again, what we see with Streamlit is often the end process. It's the thing that you want to give, but it's not all of the, you know, I got the data in the right place. I did those things with Document AI. Right? A lot of behind the scenes, right, which we had to do is actually, you know, we had to set up all of these things, right? We did this in a container service, so that's going to give us access to more of the things that we need on the ML side. And it's also going to allow us to work with a lot of this unstructured data, the audio files, the PDF files, right? That was the things that were coming in that was streaming it. And so what you can see that we did in the background to make that app possible, right, was first what we did was we set up that core text search, right? So when we're answering this, right, we're doing these types of retrieval, right, understanding, right, you know, do I need to go to a document, figuring out, right, that right document is. And we're making it really easy, right, to do this retrieval augmented generation, right, or RAG. So that when we're doing it again, I can ask the query, it's finding the right context, right, it's going to comply the right functions on top of it for you, right, so that by the time you get to the app, to that agent, it feels like magic, right? You know, they're able to just answer the question. But behind the scenes, it's because we were able to do all of this inside of Snowflake, right, and make it really easy. I really hope that that's kind of inspired you to try out some things inside of Snowflake and with Streamlit. Try out notebooks, try out Copilot. It doesn't really matter, again, what type of data. We're making it easy for you to work with. So at the end of the day, you can be the hero as the data scientist and the data engineer, helping provide those quick and useful insights, right, to your company.
So this marks actually the end of the session with Amanda. And thank you so much for being with us today.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
I hope you enjoy the visit to Korea.
I am. I'm going to go back to eating kimchi mandu and many other delicious dishes.
Okay, thank you.
네, 안녕하세요. 반갑습니다. 저는 스노우플레이크에서 솔루션 엔지니어로 근무하고 있는 유단일입니다. 이번 시간에 제가 여러분들과 나눌 주제는 스트림릿의 다채로운 활용 사례인데요. 데이터는 넘쳐나지만 때로는 그 가치를 제대로 활용하기 어렵다는 생각 다들 해보신 적 있으실 겁니다. 그래서 이 고민을 해결해 줄 강력한 도구인 스트림릿이 어떻게 기업의 데이터 활용 방식을 혁신하고 있는지 살펴보면서 여러분의 업무에도 적용할 아이디어를 얻을 수 있는 시간이 되길 바랍니다. 최근 몇 년 사이 스트림릿은 데이터 앱 개발 분야에서 간편함과 빠른 속도라는 강력한 무기를 앞세워 폭발적인 인기를 얻고 있는데요. 기존에는 데이터팀이 멋진 웹 기반 데이터 애플리케이션을 만들려면 복잡한 프론트엔드 개발 언어를 익혀야 하는 어려움이 따랐습니다. 하지만 스트림릿으로 인해 데이터팀은 익숙한 파이썬과 최소한의 코딩만으로도 데이터 시각화와 분석을 위한 인터랙티브 반응형 웹 어플리케이션을 신속하게 구축하고 활용할 수 있게 된 것입니다. 뿐만 아니라 스트림릿은 매플러립, 플러리, 팬다스 등 데이터 시각화와 데이터 사이언스 분야에서 널리 사용되는 핵심 파이썬 라이브러리들과 완벽하게 통합되어 있어 그 활용 가치를 더욱 높여줍니다. 이러한 뛰어난 장점들을 바탕으로 스트림릿은 단순한 대시보드 구축뿐만 아니라 복잡한 머신러닝 모델을 활용하는 애플리케이션 개발에 이르기까지 광범위한 분야에서 데이터 앱 개발 도구로 채택되어 기업의 데이터 활용 혁신에 크게 기여하고 있습니다. 스트림릿은 오픈소스로 자유롭게 사용할 수 있지만 스노우플레이크 플랫폼과 완벽하게 통합되어 있어 기업의 애플리케이션 개발 혁신을 지원합니다. 즉 데이터팀은 애플리케이션 개발과 운영을 위한 별도의 인프라를 구축 또는 관리할 필요가 없고요. 데이터 이동 없이 스노우플레이크의 강력한 성능, 보안, 그리고 거버넌스를 그대로 활용할 수 있습니다. 이로 인해 데이터팀은 스트림릿 특유의 쉬운 사용성과 빠른 개발 능력을 동시에 누리면서 데이터 관리와 보안에 대한 걱정 없이 애플리케이션 개발에만 더욱더 집중할 수가 있는 것입니다. 이러한 강력한 이점을 바탕으로 데이터팀은 더 이상 IT 부서의 애플리케이션 개발을 의뢰하고 오랜 시간을 기다릴 필요 없이 번뜩이는 아이디어를 스스로 빠르게 앱으로 구현하고 사용자에게 공유하여 친숙한 인터페이스를 무기로 전사 데이터 활용을 빠르게 확산시킬 수 있습니다. 뿐만 아니라 사용자 피드백을 즉각적으로 반영하여 앱을 빠르게 개선해 나갈 수 있다는 장점도 제공합니다. 자, 그러면 스트림릿을 활용하여 어떤 데이터 애플리케이션을 구현할 수 있는지 다양한 사례를 통해 그 잠재력을 한번 살펴보도록 하겠습니다. 네, 첫 번째 활용 분야는 BI 대시보드 애플리케이션인데요. 여러분은 비즈니스 현황을 파악하기 위해 주로 어떤 자료를 활용하시나요? 아마도 방대한 양의 보고서나 엑셀 시트를 분석하는 데 많은 시간을 할애하고 계실 겁니다. 하지만 그 속에서 진정으로 중요한 정보를 빠르게 찾아내고 인사이트를 얻기란 쉽지가 않죠. 바로 이러한 어려움을 스트림릿을 통해 해결할 수 있습니다. 스트림릿은 흩어져 있는 핵심 비즈니스 지표들을 다양한 시각화 자료로 탈바꿈시켜 복잡한 데이터 속에 있는 숨겨진 패턴이나 중요한 추세, 그리고 놓쳐서는 안 될 이상 징후들을 명확하게 드러내줍니다. 예를 들어 매출 데이터를 스트림릿 대시보드에서 시각화하면 어떤 제품이 잘 팔리는지, 어떤 고객층에서 매출이 집중적으로 발생하는지 이러한 지표들을 명확히 알 수 있습니다. 그래서 결국 BI 대시보드를 통해 얻는 인사이트는 경영 성과 관리, 마케팅, 제품 개발, 재고 관리 등 핵심 비즈니스 전략 수립에 즉각적으로 활용될 수 있습니다. 네, 두 번째 주목할 스트림릿의 활용 분야는 실험 또는 시뮬레이션 애플리케이션인데요. 제품을 개발하는 과정에서 다양한 가설과 아이디어를 검증하고 최적의 방향을 찾기 위해 실험은 필수적이죠. 하지만 실험 데이터를 관리하고 분석하는 과정 솔직히 쉽지만은 않을 겁니다. 여러 엑셀 파일을 오가며 결과를 기록하고 그리고 각기 다른 분석들을 사용하며 그 결과를 팀원들과 공유하는 과정은 굉장히 번거롭고 비효율적일 때가 많습니다. 이러한 비효율은 결국 시간 낭비로 이어지게 되고 데이터의 신뢰도를 떨어뜨리며 중요한 인사이트를 놓치게 만들죠. 바로 이러한 어려움을 스트림릿을 통해 해결할 수가 있습니다. 스트림릿 기반의 실험 애플리케이션은 흩어져 있던 데이터를 하나의 플랫폼으로 통합하여 데이터 사일로를 만들지 않고요. 모든 팀원이 동일한 데이터와 결과를 보며 효율적으로 협업할 수 있도록 돕습니다. 그래서 결국 불필요한 개발 비용을 절감할 수가 있고 신속하게 최적의 제품 개선 방향을 결정하여 제품의 성공 가능성을 높일 수가 있는 것입니다. 세 번째로 살펴볼 활용 분야는 바로 데이터 입력 애플리케이션입니다. 멤버십 가입이나 온라인 주문 시 정보를 입력하는 경험 다들 있으실 겁니다. 그때마다 복잡한 입력 폼 때문에 짜증나거나 오타 때문에 다시 입력해야 했던 경험도 있으실 텐데요. 스트림릿을 활용하면 이러한 불편함을 말끔히 해소할 수 있습니다. 스트림릿으로 만든 데이터 입력 앱은 직관적인 인터페이스를 제공하여 누구나 쉽고 빠르게 데이터를 입력할 수 있도록 돕습니다. 그뿐만 아니라 데이터의 유효성 검사, 자동 완성과 같은 스마트한 기능을 더해 입력 오류를 최소화하고 업무 효율성을 크게 향상시킬 수 있습니다. 예를 들어 고객 정보를 입력할 때 필수 항목을 설정하여 누락을 방지한다거나 입력된 데이터 형식을 자동으로 확인하여 데이터 품질을 높일 수가 있습니다. 또한 스트림릿은 입력된 데이터를 Snowflake 데이터 플랫폼에 즉시 저장하여 데이터가 분산되는 문제를 없애고 데이터 파이프라인을 추가로 구축할 필요가 없어져 실시간 데이터 분석을 위한 완벽한 기반을 마련할 수 있습니다. 자, 다음으로 살펴볼 스트림릿의 활용 분야는 바로 고객 분석입니다. B2C 비즈니스에서 고객을 깊이 이해하는 게 매우 중요하죠. 고객에게 맞춤화된 마케팅을 하고 특별한 경험을 주면 궁극적으로 비즈니스가 크게 성장할 수 있는 핵심 동력을 얻을 수 있습니다. 예를 들어 스노우플레이크 데이터 플랫폼에 축적된 고객의 구매 이력, 웹사이트 활동 내역, 인구 통계 등 이러한 다양한 데이터를 통합적으로 분석하면 고객의 숨겨진 니즈나 선호도 또한 행동 패턴을 명확히 파악할 수가 있습니다. 스트림릿은 고객 정보를 직관적인 차트와 그래프로 시각화하여 세그멘테이션된 고객 결과를 명확하게 확인하고 각 그룹의 특징을 쉽게 이해할 수 있도록 돕습니다. 그래서 이러한 인사이트를 기반으로 각 고객 그룹에 최적화된 맞춤형 마케팅 캠페인을 기획하거나 개인화된 제품을 추천하거나 차별화된 고객 서비스를 제공할 수 있어 고객의 만족도와 브랜드 충성도를 획기적으로 높일 수가 있습니다. 더 나아가 스노우플레이크 플랫폼에 구축한 고객 이탈 예측 모델, 즉 머신러닝 예측 모델을 이 스트림릿 애플리케이션과 연동하면 이탈 가능성이 높은 고객을 사전에 감지하고 선제적으로 관리하여 고객 유지율을 효과적으로 높일 수도 있습니다. 다음으로 살펴볼 스트림릿의 활용 분야는 바로 공급망 최적화입니다. 요즘 급변하는 국제 무역 환경 속에서 기업의 공급망 관리는 지속 가능한 성장을 위한 필수적인 생존 전략이죠. 여기서 스트림릿은 스노우플레이크라는 강력한 데이터 플랫폼과 만나 놀라운 시너지를 발휘할 수 있는데요. 스노우플레이크는 공급망 전반의 방대한 데이터, 즉 다양한 협력사와 거래처와의 실시간 데이터 공유 네트워크를 용이하게 구축할 수 있도록 지원합니다. 그리고 스트림릿은 바로 이 복잡한 데이터를 직관적인 대시보드와 시각화 자료로 탈바꿈시켜 공급망 전체에 대한 명확한 인사이트를 지원합니다. 이를 통해 기업은 수요 예측의 정확도를 높여 불필요한 재고를 줄일 수가 있고 효율적인 재고 관리를 통해 운영 비용을 절감하며 예측 불가능한 상황에 대한 대비를 강화할 수가 있습니다. 뿐만 아니라 실시간 물류 추적 정보를 통해 배송 지연을 사전에 감지하고 이로 인해 발생할 수 있는 생산에 대한 차질, 과도한 재고 축적, 고객 신뢰도 하락 등의 이런 문제들을 선제적으로 관리하여 기업의 안정적인 운영과 수익성 향상에 크게 기여할 수 있습니다. 다음으로 살펴볼 스트림릿의 활용 분야는 바로 에너지 소비 분석인데요. 에너지 비용은 기업 운영에 큰 비중을 차지하고 있어 수익성에도 영향을 미치고 있습니다. 그래서 효율적인 에너지 관리는 이제 기업 경쟁력의 중요한 요소입니다. 특히 에너지 소비량이 큰 제조와 건설 산업에서는 지속적인 개선 노력이 필수적인데요. 스트림릿은 스노우플레이크에 추적된 방대한 전력 그리고 에너지 데이터를 직관적인 시각화 대시보드를 구현하여 에너지 사용 패턴을 명확하게 분석하고 비효율적인 소비 요인을 손쉽게 드러내줍니다. 예를 들어 특정 시간대별 에너지 사용량, 설비별 소비 전력, 이런 것들을 스트림릿의 다양한 차트와 그래프를 통해 한눈에 파악하고 불필요하게 낭비되는 부분을 쉽게 식별할 수 있습니다. 이러한 분석을 통해 에너지 관리 시스템을 개선한다거나 노후 설비를 교체한다거나 운영 방식을 최적화하는 등 실질적인 에너지 절감 방안을 도출하여 지속적인 에너지 효율 개선을 추진할 수가 있습니다. 결국 에너지 효율 개선은 탄소 배출량 감소로도 이어져 기업의 ESG 경영 실천에도 크게 기여할 수 있습니다. 다음으로 살펴볼 스트림릿의 활용 분야는 바로 지리 데이터 분석인데요. 기업이 보유한 데이터 중에는 위치 정보, 즉 지리 데이터가 상당 부분을 차지하고 있습니다. 하지만 이 방대한 데이터를 효과적으로 분석하고 활용하여 의미 있는 비즈니스 인사이트를 도출하기란 쉽지 않죠. 스트림릿은 스노우플레이크에 축적된 방대한 지리 데이터를 살아있는 정보로 만들어줄 수 있습니다. 스트림릿 앱을 통해 지역별 판매 현황, 고객 분포, 물류 이동 경로 등을 지도 위에 시각화하고 사용자는 다양한 필터와 인터랙션 기능을 활용하여 원하는 지역을 확대하거나 특정 데이터를 선택하여 심층적인 분석을 수행할 수 있습니다. 이와 같은 분석을 통해 기업은 최적의 매장 입지를 선정한다거나 효과적인 타겟 마케팅 전략을 수립한다거나 효율적인 물류 네트워크 구축을 위한 인사이트를 쉽게 얻을 수 있습니다. 뿐만 아니라 공공 분야에서는 도시계획, 교통관리, 환경 모니터링, 그리고 재난 대응 등 다양한 사회적 문제 해결에도 지리 데이터를 스트림릿을 통해 시각화하고 분석하여 더욱 효과적인 의사결정을 내릴 수 있습니다. 마지막으로 살펴볼 스트림릿의 활용 분야는 요즘 가장 핫한 AI 에이전트 시스템입니다. 과거에는 데이터 활용이 특정 기술 전문가의 전유물처럼 여겨졌지만 이제 데이터 민주화는 더 이상 먼 이야기가 아니죠. 특히 혁신적인 생성형 AI 기술 덕분에 누구나 손쉽게 데이터를 활용할 수 있는 시대가 열렸습니다. 이러한 흐름 속에서 셀프 서비스 BI와 RAG와 같은 AI 에이전트 시스템은 기업의 데이터 활용 역량을 한 단계 끌어올리는 핵심 동력으로 주목받고 있습니다. 스트림릿은 스노우플레이크 플랫폼의 강력한 콜텍스 애널리스트, 즉 텍스트 투 앤서 솔루션과 완벽하게 통합되어 비즈니스 사용자의 데이터 접근성을 혁신적으로 개선합니다. 더 이상 복잡한 쿼리 작성이나 전문 분석 도구를 사용하는 방법을 익히는 데 시간을 낭비할 필요가 없이 셀프 서비스 BI 앱 구축을 통해 자연어로 궁금한 점을 질문하기만 하면 스노우플레이크 데이터베이스에서 필요한 데이터를 즉시 조회, 분석, 시각화하여 누구나 손쉽게 원하는 인사이트를 신속하게 얻을 수 있습니다. 뿐만 아니라 생성형 AI 기술은 기존의 정형 데이터 분석뿐만 아니라 기업 내부에 축적되어 있는 방대한 양의 비정형 데이터 활용에도 혁신적인 변화를 가져옵니다. RAG 방식을 통해 텍스트 문서에서 필요한 정보를 효율적으로 검색하여 LLM이 맥락에 맞는 정확한 답변을 제공할 수 있습니다. 스트림릿은 스노우플레이크 플랫폼의 콜텍스트 설치라는 문서 검색 솔루션과 또한 업계를 선도하는 LLM 모델과의 긴밀한 통합을 통해 자연어를 사용하여 기업 내부 문서의 지식을 쉽고 빠르게 활용할 수 있도록 지원합니다. 예를 들어 복잡한 법률 문서, 상세한 기술 매뉴얼, 심지어 전문적인 연구 논문에 대해 궁금한 점을 자연어로 질문하면 스트림릿 앱은 관련 정보를 빠르게 정확하게 찾아내고 LLM 모델을 이를 기반으로 신뢰도 높은 답변을 생성하여 사용자가 이해하기 쉬운 형태로 스트림릿 앱 화면에 응답합니다. 이와 같은 AI 기술을 활용한 스트림릿 앱 구축을 통해 기업은 필요한 정보에 대한 접근성을 획기적으로 개선하여 조직 전체의 데이터 활용 문화 확산과 업무 효율성을 극대화할 수가 있고요. 궁극적으로는 기업의 경쟁력을 한층 더 강화할 수 있습니다. 기존에는 비즈니스에 필요한 데이터 앱을 만들려면 보시다시피 프론트엔드, 백엔드 같은 복잡한 기술에 여러 데이터 소스까지 연결해야 해서 기술 스택이 굉장히 복잡했습니다. 그래서 전문 개발자에게 많이 의존해야 했고 개발 속도가 느리거나 운영 관리가 까다로운 문제가 많았는데요. 하지만 이제 스노우플레이크 플랫폼 하나로 복잡한 기술 스택 모든 게 통합되었습니다. 그래서 앱 개발부터 운영, 공유까지의 전 과정이 엄청나게 간소화되고 간편해졌고요. 사용자는 더욱 친숙한 인터페이스를 통해 데이터를 원하는 대로 활용할 수 있게 되었습니다. 여러분들도 더 이상 복잡한 기술에 얽매이지 마시고 스노우플레이크와 스트림릿을 통해 비즈니스의 혁신적인 변화를 만들 수 있는 강력한 데이터 기반을 마련할 수 있기를 바랍니다. 제가 준비한 발표 내용은 여기까지이고요. 경청해 주셔서 감사드립니다. 고맙습니다.
테크 전문 채널 토크아이티에서는 데이터 저장, 분석, 보호 관련 다양한 전문가들과 언제든지 상담하고 소통할 수 있는 구해줘 데이터란 공간이 있습니다. 구글에서 한글로 토크아이티 치시거나 우측 상단에 링크를 클릭하시면 됩니다. 여러분의 좋아요와 구독은 컨텐츠 제작에 큰 힘이 됩니다.